She helped the hurt cowboy without knowing he was the rich man who owned the town's only hospital. "Hey! Are you still breathing?" Clara Bennett called out, her voice shaking. The man on the porch didn't answer right away. Clara dropped to her knees beside him, her cotton nightgown clinging to her legs, soaked by the rain. The man lay face down, blood dripping from his forehead, his shirt torn and muddy, his boots scraped raw from the gravel. A wide-brimmed hat lay upside down nearby, rain pooling in its crown. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, panic sharp in her voice. His fingers twitched. Slowly, painfully, he rolled onto his side. Rain poured down the sharp line of his jaw, washing away some of the dried blood. His eyes fluttered open, pupils wide but focused. His lips moved slightly, forming a few broken words. "Do not call the cops." Clara froze. "What? You need a hospital." "No, just one night. Please," he whispered. She looked around. The woods beyond the barn were silent, not peaceful but tense, like something was holding its breath. Then she heard it, the low growl of an engine rumbling through the trees. Lights flickered in the distance, weaving between the pine trunks. "Who's after you?" she whispered urgently. He winced. "You do not want to know." Clara's heart pounded. She stood up quickly and grabbed his arm, pulling with more strength than she knew she had. "You have to move. Now." "I can't," he said, wincing in pain. "You can. And you will," she snapped. With his arm slung over her shoulder, they stumbled across the wet gravel yard toward the back of the barn. She struggled to lift the old hatch beneath the horse trough, revealing a hidden cellar once used for feed during storms. "Get in," she hissed. He stared at her, stunned. "Do you want to die on my porch, or live to see sunrise?" she barked. With a pained grunt, he dropped into the hole just as headlights crept around the bend toward her property. Clara slammed the hatch shut and threw an old tarp over it, her hands trembling. She wiped her wet dress down and hurried to the front of the barn just as a black pickup truck rolled into her yard. 3 men climbed out. Broad shoulders, dark jackets, eyes that hunted like wolves even in the dark. "Evening, ma'am," said the driver, flashing a fake smile. "Sorry to bother you so late. We're looking for someone. Might have come limping through here." Clara narrowed her eyes. "This is private property," she said sharply. "Right," the man nodded, still grinning. "Just asking if you seen a man in a cowboy hat. About 6'1", bleeding a bit. Caused some trouble." She crossed her arms tightly. "No one's come by here." "You sure about that?" another man asked, creeping toward the barn. Clara stepped forward, her voice rising with anger. "I said I haven't seen anyone. I live here alone, and I don't take kindly to strangers prowling around my land." The first man raised his hands in mock surrender. "No offense, ma'am. Just doing a bit of patrol." "I'll call the sheriff if you don't leave right now," Clara snapped. The men exchanged a quick glance, then without a word, turned back to the truck and drove off into the night. Clara waited until their tail lights disappeared beyond the trees before sprinting back to the barn. She ripped off the tarp and yanked open the hatch. "They're gone," she whispered. "Come on. We have to get you inside." The man groaned but managed to climb out with her help. By the time they stumbled into the living room, he was pale, shaking, and muttering nonsense. She laid him down carefully on the couch, then rushed to the bathroom, rummaging through drawers for anything she could find: gauze, alcohol, bandages. She returned with a bowl of warm water and a towel, her heart thudding against her ribs. "I'm not a nurse," she said aloud, more to herself than to him. "So you better not die on me, cowboy." Gently she began cleaning the wound on his head, biting her lip every time he flinched. "Sorry, she whispered. He didn't respond, just clenched his jaw tightly. "This might sting," she warned softly, pressing alcohol to the cut near his ribs. His whole body tensed, but he exhaled slowly, whispering, "It already does." She tried to smile, but it faded quickly. "You're lucky I found you first," she murmured. His eyes opened, softer now. "Maybe you're the unlucky one," he said hoarsely. Clara paused, the cloth in her hand stained red. "Why are they after you?" she asked quietly. "I made powerful enemies. Drugs, gambling." He shook his head slightly. "Truth," he whispered. "I told the truth. Wrong place. Wrong time." Clara stared at him, searching his face. Despite the pain, there was a steadiness in his gaze, something deep, something broken. "You need rest," she said gently. "We'll talk in the morning." "I'll be gone by then," he muttered. "No," she said firmly. "You're not going anywhere until I say so." He chuckled weakly, a dry, aching sound. "You're very persuasive, Miss Bennet." "Clara Bennet," she corrected softly. He nodded once before closing his eyes again. Clara sat quietly by the couch for a long while, staring into the fire she had lit. Her hands trembled as she reached for a blanket to cover him. Everything in her mind screamed for her to call the sheriff, to report the injured stranger lying in her home. But another voice inside her spoke louder. A quiet whisper. "He is not the monster here." Slowly, Clara stood, locking the front door and turning off the porch light. She stayed by the couch all night, just in case the shadows returned. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world soaked and silent. Mist hung low over the pasture, wrapping the trees in a ghostly fog. Inside the cabin, Clara moved carefully. The adrenaline had faded. Now came the second guessing. What if she had just sheltered a criminal? What if those men came back? What if he died, right there on her couch? She carried a tray of hot tea and toast into the living room. Wyatt was still unconscious, his face turned toward the back of the couch, his chest rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. "At least that's something," she whispered. She set the tray carefully on the coffee table and pulled the blanket higher over him. "Hey," she said softly, crouching beside him. "Are you awake?" No response. She reached out and touched his forehead. Warm, too warm. "You have a fever," she murmured. Clara rushed to the bathroom again, this time digging through the cabinet until she found an old thermometer and some over-the-counter painkillers. She cursed herself for not keeping a better first aid kit. When she returned, he was stirring, his brow furrowed, his lips parting. "Daniel," he mumbled. Clara froze. That name again, the same he had muttered during the night. She quickly placed the thermometer between his lips before he could say more. He squinted at her, confused. "You have a fever," she said, trying to sound calm, "and you're not going anywhere." This time, he didn't argue. He simply let her check. The thermometer beeped, 180.1. "You need antibiotics." "A hospital," she insisted. "No," he rasped, his voice dry and weak. "They will find me." "I think they already did." "You're lucky I lied for you," she said, her tone sharp. He shifted slightly, winced, and then met her eyes. "Why did you?" Clara didn't answer right away. She stared at his bruised and battered face, still holding on to some stubborn dignity. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "Maybe I saw something in your eyes. Fear or desperation. Or maybe it was the way you looked at me. Like I was your last chance." He smiled faintly. "You were." A strange feeling rushed through her. Gratitude, or maybe danger, and she stood up quickly. "Well, if I'm your nurse now, let's hope I don't kill you by accident," she said lightly. "I've had worse," he murmured. Clara shook her head, trying not to smile. She brought him the tea, helped him sit up slightly, and placed the cup in his hands. What's your name? She asked. He hesitated. Wyatt. Last name? She pressed. Just Wyatt. Clara raised an eyebrow. Fine, just Wyatt. At least tell me what happened to you. Wyatt took a sip of tea, then sighed. Some men don't like loose ends. That's vague. And terrifying, Clara said, narrowing her eyes. I wish it were more poetic, he muttered. She sat across from him, arms crossed. You said something about the truth, about telling it at the wrong time. What does that mean? Wyatt didn't answer right away. His gaze drifted toward the fireplace, watching the flames flicker and dance. I tried to expose something, he said at last, his voice low. They shut me up, and now they want to finish the job. Clara leaned forward, her voice firm. Look, Wyatt, I don't know who you are, but if I'm risking my neck for you, I need more than riddles. What did you expose? His lips pressed into a tight line. A cover-up, he said finally. In a place that's supposed to be safe. A hospital, Clara guessed. Wyatt's head jerked up slightly, surprised. She blinked. You said something in your sleep. Daniel and Drake Memorial. That's our hospital. Or it used to be. It's private now. Wyatt stared at her, saying nothing. That's it, isn't it? She pressed. You're connected to that place somehow. Wyatt set his cup down carefully. Do you really want to know? I think I need to, Clara said softly. Wyatt leaned back, grimacing slightly. Not today. Clara wanted to push for more, but something in his voice made her stop. She sighed, rubbing her temples. All right, she said reluctantly. But if men with guns show up again, I expect answers. I won't let them hurt you, he said firmly. She studied him. You say that like it's a promise you've made before. I have, he said quietly. The room fell into a heavy silence. The fire crackled gently. Outside, birds had started singing again, as if the world had already moved on. Clara stood and pulled the curtains closed. She turned back to Wyatt, who looked smaller now in the morning light, not weak, just human. I'll make you some soup, she offered with a soft smile. It's the only thing I can cook that won't kill you. He gave a faint, crooked smile. That's a good start. As Clara walked into the kitchen, she realized her hands were still trembling, but her heart, somehow, had steadied. She didn't know who Wyatt really was, not yet, but deep inside, she knew this bleeding stranger was about to change everything. 2 days passed. Wyatt was healing, slowly. The swelling on his jaw had gone down, and the bruises faded from deep purple to a dull yellow. Clara helped him move into the spare room, though he stubbornly insisted on limping around the porch, breathing in the pine-heavy air, claiming it helped clear his head. She let him, but she always kept a watchful eye on the horizon each evening. Still, no clear answers came. Wyatt remained polite, but cautious, guarded. He ate everything she made, thanked her every time, even offered to chop firewood when he felt strong enough to lift an axe. He was, in many ways, the perfect guest, but also a man shaped by shadows. One morning, Clara found him outside, working along the fence line with a coil of spare wire and a pair of rusted pliers. You don't need to work, she called from the porch. Wyatt looked over his shoulder, squinting against the rising sun. Not much else to offer but muscle, he said. You could offer your real name, she teased. He smiled but said nothing. Clara sighed. She stepped off the porch and leaned against the fence post beside him. You talk in your sleep, she said softly. I keep hearing you say Daniel. And something about they knew the dosage was wrong. What does that mean? Wyatt's hands froze on the wire. For a long moment, he said nothing. Finally he spoke, voice low and heavy. "Daniel was my brother," he said. Clara blinked. "He died in a hospital." "Not because of an accident. Not because the illness was too strong," Wyatt said, his jaw tightening. "He died because someone cut corners and lied about it afterward." She stared at him, feeling a chill run through her. "Drake Memorial?" she whispered. Wyatt nodded once, the truth finally out between them. "Were you a patient there too?" Clara asked. "No," Wyatt said, meeting her eyes. "I built it." Clara's breath caught, but before she could respond, the morning silence shattered. A deep, guttural roar of engines tore across the open fields. They both whipped around. Beyond the fence, 3 black trucks barreled toward them, wheels churning up thick clouds of dust. Sunlight flashed off their metal frames, making them look like predators closing in. Clara's heart jumped into her throat. Wyatt dropped the pliers, his body tensing, his jaw clenching tight. "Inside! Now!" he snapped, his voice sharp as a whip. "You're not going out there alone," Clara protested. "I'm not giving them another shot at you," Wyatt said fiercely. "I'm not the one they want," she argued. "You will be if they think you're helping me," he shot back. Already one of the men was pointing straight at them from the truck window. "Go!" Wyatt barked again. Clara spun and ran, not toward the house but toward the barn. She hurled herself behind the heavy door, heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Peeking through a crack, she saw Wyatt in one smooth motion swing onto the back of a nearby mare. No saddle, no bridle, just pure instinct and desperate urgency. He slammed his heels into the mare's sides. The horse shrieked and leaped forward. Wyatt clung tight as they exploded across the open field, the reins whipping wildly. The trucks tore through the outer fence, wood splintering and flying like shrapnel. Tires screeched against the earth. Engines howled with rage. A sharp crack rang out. A warning shot. Clara gasped, ducking down, her fingers digging into the splintered wood. Wyatt hunched low over the mare's neck, whispering something only the horse could hear. Together, they thundered down the slope. Hooves pounded the ground, water spraying into silver arcs as they crashed through the shallow creek. The trucks fishtailed behind them, slipping over the muddy banks, tires spitting dirt and rocks. In the lead truck, a man leaned out, a revolver glinting coldly in the morning sun. Travis Blackwell. Wyatt's eyes flicked sharply toward the woods ahead. Without hesitation, he yanked the reins hard. The mare veered sharply, muscles straining, plunging into the dense trees. Fog twisted between the pines, cloaking them like a living thing. Within seconds, Wyatt vanished into the mist. The trucks skidded to a stop at the forest's edge, metal groaning. Doors slammed open, boots hit the ground. Men charged into the woods, guns drawn, barking sharp commands. Clara stood frozen behind the barn door, her breath ragged, her heart pounding so loud she was sure they could hear it. 10 minutes passed. 20. Then, a raw, sharp cry tore through the valley. Without thinking, Clara ran. Branches scratched at her face, mud sucked at her boots, but she didn't stop. She sprinted through the woods, up the slippery slope. There, in a clearing, choked with mist and broken branches, she saw them. Wyatt stood alone, blood streaking down his temple, his shirt torn and filthy. One man lay on the ground, clutching his ribs and groaning. The other 2 stalked toward Wyatt, guns drawn. 3 against 1. Wyatt didn't flinch. With a primal roar, he launched himself at the nearest man, slamming into him with brutal force. They smashed into the mud, fists flying, grunts and curses filling the air. Behind him, a cold click. "Enough," Travis growled, his voice low and dangerous. Wyatt froze, his chest heaving. Clara pressed herself against a tree, a silent scream caught in her throat. Then, sirens. Sharp, shrill, cutting through the mist like knives. Travis cursed viciously. The men panicked, dragging their wounded companion back through the trees toward the trucks. Engines roared back to life. Clara stumbled forward, her legs trembling. Through the fog, flashing blue lights sliced the air. 2 patrol SUVs skidded into the clearing, deputies leaping out, weapons drawn. Wyatt, battered and bloody, dropped to his knees, hands raised in surrender. The older deputy, a gray-bearded man, narrowed his eyes, then slowly lowered his rifle. "Son of a gun," he muttered. "That really is Wyatt Carter." Clara's world tilted. "Carter, as in Carter Memorial Hospital?" she whispered, staggering closer. There he was. No defenses, no more lies. Only truth, raw and undeniable. Clara stood frozen as the name echoed through her mind. Wyatt Carter. She had heard it before, in whispers, in faded headlines, in town gossip about the mysterious man who built Carter Memorial Hospital, and then disappeared. Some called him a fraud, others a martyr. No one really knew the truth. She had thought Wyatt was just a drifter, running from some private pain. But this was a storm decades in the making. As the deputies helped him toward the SUV, Clara stepped aside, heart pounding. Wyatt looked back at her once, his expression unreadable, carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. "Ma'am," the older deputy said, tipping his hat, "we'll need your statement." Clara nodded numbly. "Of course." Wyatt was taken in, not cuffed, but clearly not free. Clara followed in her truck, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her fingers ached. At the station, she sat in the waiting room, numb. After what felt like hours, the deputy returned. "Looks like that cowboy you've been hiding isn't just anybody," he said. "That's Dr. Wyatt Carter." Clara blinked, stunned. "Doctor?" "Harvard-trained. Founded Carter Memorial. Ran it until things went south," the deputy said. "There was a death. His younger brother, Daniel. Supposed overdose. The board blamed Wyatt. He disappeared. Some folks thought he took his own life. Turns out he just went underground." Clara barely heard the rest. Her mind spun, trying to catch up. Later, she was led into a small room where Wyatt sat, bruised, bandaged, silent. He looked up as she entered. She closed the door behind her. "You lied to me," she said quietly. "I didn't tell the truth," Wyatt said, his voice just a whisper. "There's a difference," Clara said. "You told me your name was just Wyatt." "It is," he replied. "Carter's a name I left behind." "Why?" she asked, crossing her arms tightly. "Because people die when they tell the truth," he said, his voice low. "I tried to protect Daniel. He found problems in the hospital's pharmacy records, falsified data, dangerous mistakes. He brought it to me. I promised I'd shield him. The next day he was dead." Clara's breath caught. "They called it an allergic reaction," Wyatt continued, "but someone changed his file after he died. He wasn't even supposed to be on that medication." "Who did it?" Clara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Travis Blackwell," Wyatt said, his eyes darkening, "and 2 others on the board. Daniel found proof they were stealing money and cutting corners." "Why not go to the police?" she pressed. "I did," he said bitterly. "They told me I was grieving, not thinking clearly. I tried to go public, but the board twisted everything. Within a week I was ruined. So I disappeared, to gather proof quietly." "Until they found you again," Clara said. Wyatt nodded slowly. "Travis must have realized I came back to Red Hollow." Clara wiped at her eyes, her throat tight. "I would have helped you, if you had told me." "I didn't want to drag you into this," Wyatt said, his voice rough. "You already did," she whispered. They sat in silence for a long moment, the fire popping quietly nearby. Then Wyatt spoke, his voice softer now. I didn't think I'd survive that night. I was ready to die. But then, you opened the door. Clara swallowed hard. You saved my life too, Wyatt, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Even before I knew who you were. He looked up at her, exhaustion in his eyes, but also a deep, undeniable truth. I still don't know everything, Clara said, steadying herself. But I know you're not the villain they made you out to be, and I know you loved your brother. Wyatt's jaw tightened. He gave a small, pained nod. I'll help you, Clara said firmly. We'll finish what Daniel started. Clara had never been inside Carter Memorial Hospital before. At least not since it had changed hands. The place felt less like a hospital and more like a business center now. Polished floors, cold lighting. The comforting scent of antiseptic had been replaced with something sterile and hollow. The old brass plaque with Wyatt's name had long been taken down, replaced by a sleek new logo etched into brushed metal. Clutching a worn manila folder tightly under her arm, Clara stood in the lobby. Inside were copies of everything Wyatt had given her, patient reports, pharmacy inventories, and the handwritten notes Daniel had left behind. Sacred pieces Wyatt had guarded for years. Clara walked up to the reception desk and drew a steady breath. I'm here to see Dr. Morrison, she said calmly. The receptionist raised an eyebrow. Do you have an appointment? No, Clara said, steady, but he'll want to see me. It's about Dr. Wyatt Carter. The receptionist paused. The name seemed to ripple through the air. She picked up the phone, murmured something, then nodded down the hallway. Third floor, last door on the right. Dr. Morrison was one of the few still at the hospital who had known Wyatt before everything fell apart, an older, respected surgeon who had never publicly taken sides. Clara prayed that meant he still had a conscience. She found him behind his desk, glasses perched on his nose, reading a file with a magnifier clipped in place. When she entered, he looked up slowly. Can I help you? He asked, cautious. My name is Clara Bennett, she said, her voice steady. I have information about what happened to Daniel Carter and Wyatt. The name made him flinch. He leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. Go on, he said. Clara placed the folder on his desk and pushed it toward him. Wyatt's alive, she said. He's been hiding since the incident, and now they've tried to kill him again, Travis Blackwell and his men. Dr. Morrison opened the folder, flipping through the documents. She watched his face change, from skepticism to disbelief to a growing, quiet horror. I always knew something was wrong, he muttered. Daniel was careful, brilliant. He double-checked everything. That allergy note missing from his chart. It disappeared the day after he died. Clara sat down across from him. Wyatt needs someone to verify this, she said. Someone who still has credibility. Dr. Morrison looked up at her. And you? He asked. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor, Clara said plainly. I'm just a woman who found a bleeding man on her porch and decided not to let him die. I didn't know who he was, but I believe him now. Dr. Morrison studied her for a long moment. Then, finally, he nodded. I kept copies of the old staff reports, he said quietly. The board forced us to destroy everything, but I saved them. I never knew why. Maybe this is why. Together they sifted through old files, piecing together rosters, medical logs, and buried emails. Clara's heart pounded as the pattern emerged. Clear evidence of tampering, false signatures, reissued prescriptions that were never administered. Every page confirmed Wyatt's story. When Clara returned to the station that evening, she found Wyatt sitting on the same cot, reading a tattered paperback. She walked in and dropped the updated folder onto his lap. Dr. Morrison remembers, she said quietly, her voice firm. And he has proof. Wyatt blinked in shock. He helped you? He believed me, Clara said with a small smile. And he believes you. Wyatt exhaled slowly, leaning forward as he flipped through the papers. His hands trembled slightly. This is it, he whispered. This is what I needed. 5 years ago. Clara sat beside him, her heart steady. Then let's make sure it doesn't get buried again, she said. They spent the next few hours working side by side, Wyatt guiding her through names, dates, and connections. Clara typed everything into a clean, clear timeline on her laptop, while Wyatt annotated the documents, highlighting every forged signature, every altered dosage, every person involved in the cover-up. When they finally finished, Wyatt leaned back, exhausted. I never imagined, he said softly, I would get this far. Why not? Clara asked. Why not? Clara asked. Because the world moves on, Wyatt said quietly. People forget. They let things fade. Justice is slow, brutal, and by the time it catches up, most have already stopped looking. Clara looked at him, her voice soft but steady. Then it's a good thing you had someone still looking. Wyatt turned his gaze toward her. For a long moment he said nothing. Then finally he spoke. You shouldn't have had to do this. No, she agreed. But I would do it again. He reached for her hand, his fingers gently brushing hers. Thank you. Clara smiled warmly. You're not done yet, Carter. We still have one more thing to do. What's that? He asked. Make the whole damn town listen, she said, fire in her voice. That night, Wyatt drafted a letter, a full confession, written by hand, detailing everything from the day Daniel died to the day Wyatt bled on Clara's porch. Clara, with her steady typing and sharper instincts, helped turn it into something powerful, personal, factual, devastating. Together, they prepared it for the world. At last, the truth was ready to breathe. The town hall was quiet at dusk. Only the faint buzz of old fluorescent lights and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards echoed through the empty chambers. Clara stood by the window, watching long shadows stretch across the main square. Behind her, Wyatt paced, tense and silent. Everything had been set. They had arranged a meeting under the pretense of discussing the reopening of the Carter Memorial Funding Foundation. A lie, but just believable enough to lure Travis Blackwell and the remaining board members. The sheriff, finally convinced by Wyatt's evidence and Dr. Morrison's testimony, had agreed to install audio surveillance and a hidden camera inside the room. The plan was simple. Get them to talk. Get them to admit everything. Are you sure about this? Clara asked, turning to Wyatt. He nodded firmly. They need to think I'm desperate enough to deal. That's when men like Travis feel invincible. And that's when they slip. Clara swallowed hard. If anything goes wrong... I know, Wyatt said, his voice low. But I won't let them take someone else. Not again. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. The sheriff entered first, giving Wyatt a slight nod. Behind him, Travis Blackwell and 2 men in sharp suits followed. Travis was the same as ever. Perfect hair, fake smile, eyes like cold stones. Well, well, he said with a smirk, spreading his arms wide. Dr. Carter. Or should I say, the ghost of him. Wyatt didn't flinch. Let's skip the pleasantries. They all sat around the long oak table. Clara sat close to Wyatt, her hands folded tightly, heart pounding against her ribs. I want a deal, Wyatt said, his voice calm and steady. Reinstate the Daniel Carter Fund. Reopen the investigation. Clear my name. In return, I walk away. I stay quiet. Travis leaned back lazily. That's not how leverage works. You disappeared, remember? The world thinks you drowned yourself out of guilt. I came back, Wyatt said firmly, to clean up the rot you left behind. Travis chuckled coldly. What rot? Everything you claim is long buried. No one remembers Daniel. Or you. You do, Wyatt said quietly. And that's enough. Clara watched the red light blink steadily on the hidden recorder. Let's be honest, one of the board members said. Daniel was a liability. Bright kid. Too curious. He got in the way. Wyatt's jaw tightened. Travis nodded smugly. It was unfortunate, but necessary. You would have done the same if you had the guts. The words hung in the air like poison. Suddenly, the sheriff burst through the adjacent door, gun drawn. That's enough, he barked. Travis shot to his feet, his face twisting with rage. What the hell is this? He shouted. You're under arrest, the sheriff said coldly, for conspiracy, medical malpractice, and attempted murder. You and your whole operation. The board members froze as deputies flooded the room, guns raised. But Travis was faster. He pulled a pistol from inside his jacket and aimed it straight at Clara. Don't move, he roared. Wyatt moved faster. He lunged, shoving Clara to the ground and throwing himself between her and the gun. The shot rang out, a deafening crack. Wyatt stumbled, clutching his side as he dropped to one knee. Wyatt! Clara screamed. The sheriff fell backward, his weapons skidding across the floor. Deputies swarmed Travis, wrestling him to the ground as Wyatt collapsed completely. Blood was already blooming across his shirt. Clara crawled to him, pressing her hands desperately against the wound. Stay with me, Wyatt. Please, she cried. His eyes fluttered open, a faint, pained smile tugging at his lips. Still hate getting shot, he whispered weakly. Shut up and save your strength, Clara sobbed, trying to smile through her tears. The sheriff knelt beside them, radioing for paramedics. They're on the way! Hold on, son! Wyatt's hand reached up, weakly gripping Clara's. Did we get them? He rasped. She nodded through her tears. We got them all. A faint smile crossed his face. Good. Daniel can rest now, he whispered, before his head lolled back, unconscious. Sirens screamed through the night as Clara clung to him, shaking, whispering desperate promises into his ear. That he would not die. That he would come back. Not just for her, but for the truth. For justice. For Daniel. The ICU room was cold and too quiet. Machines beeped steadily beside Wyatt's bed, each sound a tiny reminder that he was still alive, but just barely. Tubes ran from his arms and nose, monitors tracking his slow, stubborn heartbeat. Clara hadn't moved from her chair in over 24 hours. She sat straight-backed, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes never leaving Wyatt's face. His skin was pale, lips cracked. They had removed the bullet, but the damage had been deep. The doctor's warning echoed in her mind. The next 48 hours were critical. Clara had only nodded silently, then returned to her post, vigilant, unblinking. She refused to go home. A nurse brought her coffee. Another offered to bring a cot. Clara declined both. She couldn't leave him. Not now, not after everything they had survived, not after the look in his eyes when he asked if they had gotten them. She had said yes, but she hadn't told him everything. She had gotten more than justice. She had gotten his full story, the public's attention, and the truth, now spreading like wildfire through Red Hollow and beyond. That morning, the sheriff had held a press conference, using the recordings Wyatt and Clara had collected. Dr. Morrison had confirmed every word. Several former hospital employees had come forward, sharing stories they had once been too afraid to tell. Travis Blackwell and the 2 board members were denied bail. Investigations had opened at both the state and federal levels. Wyatt's name was cleared in less than 12 hours. But Wyatt remained silent. Clara pulled a folded letter from her coat pocket, old, yellowed, and creased. She had found it in Wyatt's duffel bag, hidden under years of guarded evidence. It was addressed simply, "To my brother, if I cannot say goodbye." She unfolded it, her hands trembling, and began to read aloud. "Daniel, I was supposed to protect you. That was always the deal. Big Brother watches your back. But I let you walk into that storm alone. I believed the system would do the right thing. I was wrong." Her voice cracked. She paused, swallowing hard before continuing. "They tried to silence me after you were gone. Tried to make me forget you. But I never did. Every step I took since the day they buried you, I took for you. I became a ghost not because I wanted to disappear, but because I needed to haunt them, until they broke." Clara looked at Wyatt's still face, her voice softening. "I found your letter, Wyatt," she whispered. "I read it. I think Daniel heard you. I think he forgave you. Long before you forgave yourself." She stood, walked to his bedside, and gently brushed a lock of hair from his forehead. "You've done enough running," she said. "It's time to come back." A minute passed, then another, and then, slowly, his eyelids twitched. Clara's breath caught. "Wyatt," she whispered. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then finding hers. He blinked and croaked out, "Did I die?" She laughed, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Almost," she whispered, "but I wouldn't let you." He tried to smile, wincing as he shifted slightly. "Still, terrible bedside manner." "You're not exactly low maintenance," she teased, wiping at her face. His gaze softened. "You stayed," he whispered. "I told you I would," Clara said. A long silence passed between them, filled only by the steady hum of machines. "Is it over?" Wyatt asked finally. "Yes," Clara said, nodding, her heart full. "It's over. You're free." Wyatt looked away for a moment, his voice raw. "I don't know what to do now. I spent so long fighting. I don't know how to live." Clara leaned forward and took his hand in hers. "You start small," she said softly. "One day at a time. Maybe with coffee, a sunrise, and someone who refuses to give up on you." His fingers closed gently around hers. "I don't deserve that," he murmured. "Yes, you do," she said fiercely. "Not because of who you were, but because of who you became." His eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I used to dream about getting justice," he said. "But it never looked like this. It never looked like you." Clara smiled, her thumb brushing over his knuckles. "Then maybe it's time to stop dreaming and start living." He nodded faintly, exhausted but peaceful for the first time in years. Clara leaned in and pressed a soft kiss to his forehead. "You came back, Wyatt," she whispered. "That's all that matters." And for the first time in a long, long time, Wyatt Carter closed his eyes, not to escape, but to rest, safely, beside the one person who refused to let him go. 3 weeks later, Carter Memorial Hospital reopened its doors, not for an emergency, but for a celebration. The parking lot buzzed with life. News vans lined the curb. People gathered, not out of fear but out of hope, something Red Hollow hadn't felt in years. A new banner hung over the entrance, Daniel Carter Healing Center. Deep blue, bold, proud. Wyatt stood at the podium, dressed simply in a white shirt and jeans, his boots still scuffed from the long journey back. Beside him stood Clara, serene in a light sundress, her hands gently clasped. "My name is Dr. Wyatt Carter," he began. "And for a long time I disappeared. I thought silence was the only way to protect my brother's name. But silence only made the injustice louder." He glanced at Clara, her gaze steady with pride. "I'm no hero," he continued. "I'm here because one person refused to let me give up. Today we don't rebuild what was lost. We build what should have always been. A place of healing. A place for Daniel." The crowd erupted into applause. Some cheered, others wept. Later, they walked the newly named halls together. A mural greeted visitors, an image of Wyatt and Daniel, drawn from an old photo, bathed in sunlight. Clara wore a new badge, Director of Community Outreach. "Director, huh?" Wyatt teased, nudging her gently. "If I'm going to keep you out of trouble, I might as well get a title," she joked back. He smiled, wincing slightly, his ribs still sore, but the pain bearable now, like the past itself. "I never thought I'd come back," Wyatt said quietly. "Why did you?" Clara asked. He paused at the mural, his voice soft. "Because Daniel deserved more than my silence. And you deserved more than a goodbye." "You gave us both everything," she whispered. "Now the rest is yours." Wyatt looked at her, emotion shining in his eyes. "I want more than this center, Clara," he said. "I want a life. With you." "You already have it," she replied, smiling through tears. As sunset approached, Clara's eyes drifted toward the hills. "You still have that horse?" she asked. Wyatt grinned. "Always." They left the hospital together as the last golden light spread across the valley. At the ranch, 2 horses waited, Wyatt's old companion, and another saddled beside it. "You planned this?" Clara said, smirking. "I hoped you'd say yes," Wyatt said, his grin widening. They rode together into the open fields, the wind brushing their cheeks, the thistles dancing in the breeze. The same ridge where Wyatt had once fallen now carried him home, not as a fugitive, but as a man restored. "This is where you almost died," Clara said softly. He nodded. "But it became the place I came back to life." They crested the hill, gazing out over Red Hollow. The hospital's new sign glowed warmly in the fading light. Wyatt slowed his horse and turned to Clara. "I chased justice for so long. I forgot what joy feels like. You reminded me." Clara reached across and took his hand. "No more running," she whispered. "Not ever again," he vowed. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Wyatt Carter and Clara Bennett rode into the twilight, not as broken souls, but as 2 hearts, healed and whole, ready to live the life they had fought so hard to earn, together. And so, under a sky painted in gold and promise, Wyatt Carter and Clara Bennett chose not just to survive, but to live, to love, and to begin again. From the pain of loss rose a legacy of healing. From the silence of the past came a voice that finally spoke the truth. And from the edge of death came life, reborn in the heart of another. If this story touched your soul, helped you believe in love, redemption, or the power of second chances, please consider subscribing to Soul-Stirring Stories. We bring you true, heartfelt tales that heal, inspire, and remind you that no matter how dark the night, there is always light at dawn. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and never miss a story that could change your day, or even your life. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and keep your heart open. Soul-Stirring Stories.